All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja. Now, despite the despondent state of electricity supply in Nigeria, the federal government has spent nothing less than 2.8 trillion naira to subsidize electricity consumption from 2015 to June 2023 and recorded not its desired result by not generating up to 1/4 of its 20,000 megawatts it had dreamt of generating, distributing and transmitting by the year 2020. Now, with daily electricity offtake by the distribution companies hovering around an average of 3,000 megawatts in the last 10 years, as disco's remittances remained below par despite series of intervention by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Aggregate technical, commercial and collection losses by some discos still stand at about 75%. Now, crumbling due to the liquidity crisis, Nigeria's power sector has distorted the books of financial institutions and pushed small and medium enterprises as well as manufacturers out of business while failing to report profit. There are indications that the tariff shortfall may climb to record high in the second half of this year, following the suspension of the sector's multi-year tariff order implemented through the service-based tariff. The service-based tariff and had relieved the government and passed the burden of the sector's inefficiencies to consumers. We'll be talking about this. We have in the studio Dr. Abubakar Atiku. He is a former Managing Director, Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, and also visiting professor of Usman, visiting lecturer, professor of the University, Usman Danfodiyo University in Sokoto, and also board member of the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
You're welcome, and good morning.
All right. Well, from our introduction, you could tell where this conversation is going on. The power sector is one sector that a lot of Nigerians feel a lot has been given to, yet with not commensurable results in terms of supply of power to Nigerians till date. I mean, for decades we've been talking about, you know, the epileptic nature of power supply in Nigeria, and yet when we have these conversations, it's hard to put a finger on where exactly the problem is with all these interventions. Now we're talking about 2.8 trillion naira in subsidies for power. Is it time to stop the payment of the subsidies as well for power?
Thank you very much. I think you have said it rightly, that a lot has been expended in the power sector, and unfortunately it's not commensurate with the results we are seeing. There are many factors that are leading to this. When you look at our capability to generate electricity that is in the generation station, it is still not adequate, despite the fact that that sector of the power sector value chain has been privatized. We expected a lot from the distribution companies to be able to improve and expand their capacity in generation. Some of them have performed a little bit above average. For example, Egbin and Ugeli Power, Transcorp Power now, they have improved, but a lot of them are still trying to reach to the target they have set for themselves when they got these companies. In the hydro too, we have some of them, like Mainstream, have improved relatively. We also have new generating company in Zungeru, which has just been commissioned. It has started producing electricity. So we are still not yet there, because what we are generating is grossly inadequate compared to the demand that we have in Nigeria. So a lot need to be done. For example, there are other factors that may not get them there in terms of the raw materials they need. Gas is essential, and it is grossly inadequate, even though we are one of the largest producers of gas, but domestically we are still shortchanged. We are not getting enough for the power stations. Of course, hydros, you know, they are seasonal. When we have drought, water level will go low and will not get the optimal from them.
But the bigger challenge here, it appears, is the distribution of whatever has been generated.
Exactly.
Because from the records we are saying that
I just started from the background, from the source.
Yes.
Transmission is there, it's in between. Because whatever you generate, you have to be able to get it across to the distribution companies. Transmission is still being an entity of the government, but still it is not robust enough to carry all the power that we can potentially generate. For example, right now we have capacity to generate about 13,000 megawatts, but what can TCN transmit? I think the maximum, it said from simulations and other stress tests carried on the transmission network, it cannot carry more than 8,000 megawatts. So that you see, there has to be always a situation whereby whatever we generate, transmission should be able to evacuate double of that capacity, but it's not happening. The maximum it has transmitted is just 5,000 plus. Quite okay. The offtake or those distribution companies are not in a position to carry up to that 5,000 megawatts because they don't expand as well in terms of the infrastructure. It's still the legacy equipment that they inherited from PHCN that they are using. So it is really a very precarious situation. And these distribution companies, which are privatized now, government is only taking 40% of the share, are not really doing that they should to be able to evacuate this power. Sometimes even if we have power getting to 5,000 megawatts availability, you find out the distribution companies are not picking up all this load. Why? Because of the liquidity crisis. Power they are supposed to sell out, when they take it, they don't normally recover all the revenue. You have said it all, the ATC and C losses. Some of the discourse are at 75%, which means only 25% of the energy is being recovered. So that is a serious situation.
Let's talk more about this. Earlier Ayuba asked, talking about the amount being spent on this, and there is still finger being pointed on who is to blame. You're saying, okay, the distribution, they generate enough, but then it's not distributed well, and we keep seeing the power grid collapsing. Since the privatization, of the power sector, there's been a lot of back and forth. The money is being provided from the government. So what needs to be done in order to handle this particular situation? Because Nigerians at this point are tired of, hearing the same excuses of saying, okay, no, it's not, we can generate this, but it's not reaching you people. So what needs to be done in order to tackle this particular situation? Okay,
just as you said, I don't want to dwell into the blame. So, but all we know is that in the power value chain, everybody has a stake and has a role to perform. And once you are not able to perform that role, obviously there will be problems. When you come to the distribution side, which I've just mentioned, in fact, that is where it matters, because that is where the liquidity comes in. if a distribution company, for example, is having 50% ATC and C losses, it means it can only recover 50% of the amount of energy it takes from the transmission or from the national grid. There are a lot of problems. When you look at even the metering aspect, it is there. Customers are not properly metered, so the billing efficiency is very low, which means you cannot even account for the energy, talk less of even recovering the revenue. So a lot needs to be done there. And when you look at some of the customers, they are not really helping matters. They are not paying. When you look at government, for example, the MDS, they are owing billions of naira to these distribution companies. And some of them you cannot go to disconnect. Some are armed forces, some are restricted areas. So distribution companies are in a fix. Sometimes they have to go out of their way to see how they can get their money out.
Doctor, you know, speaking on that consumer, we're going to take a pause because I know that there's a lot of things we need to talk about the consumers right here, but let's quickly take a short break, and when we come back, of course, the discussion continue. Stay with us.
All right, thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. And yes, we're talking about the power sector and all the government's investment in that sector, and also analyzing the returns or the results that we have seen over the years. There's been a report that 2.8 trillion naira has been spent in the last 10 years subsidizing power, and yet all we have is a paltry, maybe 3,000 megawatts that is being distributed. So that's our focus. We also have joining Oyebode Fadipe, CEO, Sage Consulting and Communications, and also been talking to Dr. Abubakar Atiku, who is a former Managing Director, Transmission Company of Nigeria. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Oyebode, on the program.
Thank you very much. Nice having me.
All right. Well, let me start with you. So we've heard from Doctor a little bit. Back in August, Daily Trust did a story that says Benin, Niger, and Togo owe Nigeria 132.2 billion naira energy bills in 4 years, and yet here we are talking about 2.8 trillion naira spent on subsidies. So are we ending up subsidizing our neighbors as well, as we've done with the petroleum, our fuel, that finally we've been able to remove the subsidy here?
I thank you once again for having me. I wouldn't say we are subsidizing them in that sense, but I think it's what I would call an enlightened self-interest. Because if you, yes, it's not right for them to owe, but what is the implication? And I thank God for Oga that is sitting by my side. I mean, he has operated the network before, so he will understand both the technical and the political implication of not allowing what looks like an indebtedness. Because if they cut us off, part of our own power facilities will be in trouble, and that will affect us directly. So these are issues that are taken up at diplomatic levels, so that at the end of the day, you can still draw benefits from the hydro facility that is enjoying water supply from that direction.
So it's like a trade by barter?
Something like that. Although I would have expected that as a responsible customer, with profound respect to diplomatic niceties, I would have expected that as a responsible customer, they will also take steps to make sure that whatever they are owing, they also pay. If they are going to write it off at diplomatic level, let it be clearly stated that we have written off the debt. But if it is still outstanding, because electricity, unfortunately, we started from the concept of social amenity, where government is supposed to provide it and things like that. If you trace the history of electricity in this country, that was the kind of concept we had. And luckily enough, we ran into so much money. So government felt, I can take up everything. All of the brickbats between Niger Dams Authority and ECN was intended to be resolved by the joining together of those two bodies in 1972 under the Gowon administration. And then you took off from there. So we had a lot of money at that time to provide electricity. And then, of course, we were the big brother Africa. And we're doing so many things. But government is no longer comfortable with taking up all of those responsibilities. Government says, I cannot fund everything again. Yet you still have to provide electricity to those countries that you had been doing that kind of thing for before. I mean, imagine what this country was in the 70s. Imagine what this country was in the 80s. Imagine what it was in the 90s. But
Mr. Fadipe, is it, would you say that, privatizing the power sector was the best decision the government made? Because we have seen how the whole, distribution system has gone bad. For 10 years, there is just, the tariff keep increasing for the consumers, but then the same process. There hasn't been this stability.
Rather than ask whether it was the best, I would say it was the most pragmatic in the circumstance. Rather than say it was, because government, some of us have argued against it, that the concept of government has no business in business does not make sense, with profound respect. Government is the leader of business. Government provides the enabling environment. So government has interest in making sure that business succeeds. So if government now says, okay, because of the paucity of funds, I am divesting my ownership, I am diluting my equity, and say, okay, let the public take 60%. Of course, it is still Nigerians that are going to own those entities to make sure that you create further enabling environment for employment and several other things. Make the system, we can list on our fingers some of the reasons why government decided to privatize. One, I don't have enough money again to run a sector that can make money for itself. Because let's not forget the fact that power sector, if not for the fact that money comes in forex for the petroleum industry, the next most viable government business is power. Electricity is everyday money. One. Two, you cannot have too much of electricity, because the more you have, particularly in an economy that is so blessed with a lot of human factors, you cannot have so much. You cannot have this population and not want to consume so much. The conventional wisdom is that it is 1,000 megawatts to 1 million people. So if you have 200 million people assuming that our figure is correct, if you have 200 million people, the straight math is that you should have 200,000 megawatts. Look at what 200,000 megawatts will be bringing in terms of quantum of naira every day, compared with what forex is bringing in. So electricity is a very lucrative industry. However, it is highly capital intensive.
Okay. All right, Doctor, let me throw this to you. How do we deal with the issue of mismanagement in that sector? Since we do not generate enough to start with, how do we efficiently maximize the distribution of at least the ones that we've generated?
Well, there are a lot of ways of doing that. For example, when you look at the sectors of the economy, I think the industrial sector is a very crucial sector which has to be taken into consideration and prioritized. And in fact, that is where bulk of the revenue comes from. So I think if we can prioritize and then ensure that the industries are given the power they need to manufacture and to produce their products, it will go a long way in helping the economy to grow. I'm not saying that we leave out yourself and myself, the customers, the ordinary customers, but there should be a way of managing the power through systematic load shedding, whereby you know the particular time of need for these industries and make sure that you give them what is available. Then, for example, in the night when customers, the residential customers need it most, then you can also channel that power to them. So this is one of the ways to manage power which is inadequate through systematic load shedding by the distribution company, such that they prioritize and make sure that at certain periods of times you channel the power where it is most needed and more productive for the economy.
But in terms of increasing offtake for distribution, you know, transmitting whatever has been generated, what do we need to do? Because obviously there's a lot of gap there.
Yeah, what you need to do is to continuously expand the system. The network we have, both in terms of transmission and distribution, are dilapidated. Most of them have outlived their usefulness. They are just being managed. In fact, you must commend NEPA staff for being able to manage these systems. In developed countries, most of those transformers, the lines, they are obsolete. They are scrapped, but we are managing them. We are trying to make them perform, even though they have outlived their usefulness. So it is important to continuously expand.
But you need liquidity to do that.
Exactly, that is one.
And if we have government, for instance, owing,
exactly, then it becomes...
Then how does that happen?
Yeah, that is the dilemma we are in, because we need that liquidity to be able to expand. Quite okay, transmission government is doing quite a lot through many initiatives to get the system improved. But when you come to distribution, which has been privatized, I think the distribution companies must devise strategies, get more investment so that they can be able to expand. I'm even suggesting that the 40% share of the government can be sold up so that they be more liquid to be able to invest. And the distribution companies, some of them are really not performing. We have 10 years window, and it is just, I think, this November that it has to be reviewed. So governments should do something to review and make sure that those that are not performing are shown the way out. And where you need to consolidate, some of them, like the banking sector, you need to do so that they become more liquid, more capable of investing and providing the services.
Mr. Oyebode, the last time we heard a story from, I think it was in Kebbi State, where an official of the electricity company in the state was beaten up for cutting, I think some personnel, military personnel, invaded the office of the electricity company and beat up some of the staff there and so on. So, and you find that, of course, the officials of the electricity company are working under instruction, and they are working based on, you know, what targets and so on and so forth. But if that is not met, how do you deal with situations like that?
No, you see, this is one of the unfortunate legacies that we still deal with in this country. Part of that is coming from the military mentality. No laws, no regulations, no nothing. People just do what they want to do and then they get away scot-free and stuff like that. I don't expect that we would still have a situation where there will be certain class of people in this country that will say, no, we can't pay for electricity. Assuming without considering that even those that were assaulted did not do the right thing. As a law enforcement agent, you owe the country the responsibility to be of best behavior in terms of law keeping. Okay, gentlemen, you have done the wrong thing, but we will not do the wrong thing because two wrongs don't make a right. In the worst case scenario, arrest them, take them to their office, or take them to the police, let them be prosecuted for doing the wrong thing, or you complain to the regulator. There is a regulator in this country that supervises the power sector, and that is the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. I will expect that commission to be able to take up that responsibility and bite those, the staff, or cause the disco whose staff had heard to pay some penalties next time when the workers are going out and they have deducted that fine from their salary. They will know how to conduct, because if the rule says that as a customer I need to inform you before I disconnect, and I walk into your place arrogantly and I disconnect, and as a result of my action the company is made to pay fine and that is deducted from my salary, whether the economy is good or not, next time when I'm going to a customer's house I will behave myself properly. So we have a case of both customers and service provider, everybody is just doing what they feel they want to do at any point in time. You see customers owing the service provider huge sums of money, and government is the most delinquent in this area. MDAs, they are delinquent.
Well, Mr. Fadipe, don't you think it's because the customers are thinking that they are not getting the adequate supply?
Even for those, see, I operated, with profound respect to Dr. Atiku, I can say that I know the discourse a little bit more than he does. We dealt with customers who said, I have paid my dues in this country. In Maitama, I'm not talking of Kagini, I'm not talking of Nyanya, I'm not talking of Day. I'm talking of Maitama, I'm talking of Wuse, I'm talking of Utako, I'm talking of Jabi, I'm talking of Sokoto, where electricity is almost 25/8. If you understand what I'm saying, is almost, if it blinks, we run to make sure that the supply is restored almost immediately. Yet you will have senior government officials, those who are politically exposed, tell you straight to your face that no, you can't disconnect me because I paid my dues. Who runs the power sector like that? Who does that kind of thing? I'm not saying that the discos or the power sector operators are not delinquent in certain areas. They are, and nobody can run away from that fact. But the fact remains that even you as a customer, you have a responsibility, and that's why I said we have a history of social amenity mentality. This is my own share of the national cake. Therefore, once I have a share of it, I will keep it in my pocket.
So
anybody
could
can go to
this be
them.
one of the things that is affecting the growth of the power sector? Because we've seen the government, spend millions. I mean, we're talking about trillions.
Yes.
And we're still in the same thing for the past 10 years.
Yes, it's quite sad that we are still where we are. Look at what happened to about 6 discos, was it this year or last year, where they had to be taken over. What has happened to them? Like Oga rightly said, we think there should be a secondary acquisition. There are those who hold the view that there should be a secondary acquisition, and in some sense government is moving in the direction of even diluting its interest in TCN. For instance, by the new act, that part of TCN called ISO, Independent System Operator, is supposed to be registered as a full business entity. By so doing, it is now pulled out. Who is the ISO? The ISO is that part of the transmission company that deals with load management. That's exactly what they do. The second ambit of the TCN is the transmission service provider, which deals with the physical structures that you can behold. Those towers that you see, those lines that you see running, those transmission stations like Katampe, using that one as an example, or the one in Apo, using that one as an example. That is what the TSP manages. If you see a tower has collapsed anywhere in the country, it is TSP's responsibility. But when you see load, like we had system collapse about 2 weeks ago, that is ISO, Independent System Operator. It is expected that by the new act, Independent System Operator will be pulled out. So you find a gradual dismemberment, or how do I put it? Let me know. I think that's not a more appropriate. I mean, that's not an appropriate word. You find a gradual
unbundling.
Yes, thank you, sir. Unbundling of the entire behemoth that you call the Transmission Company of Nigeria into smaller units so that they can run more efficiently. I tell you the truth, all of us are sad about the fact that our power sector is still where it is. But those who are working are still working. And I can give that concession to Transmission Company of Nigeria. One, I know that between 2022 and date, they had executed 26 projects that have improved their services such that we could have 421 days of uninterrupted grid management. That's an unprecedented thing, at least within the framework of the privatization period of 10 years. Before now, there were periods that we had up to 22 system collapse. That's scandalous. But for 421 days, until about last week or 2 weeks ago, when we now had a back-to-back Jeba Kainji 330 kV line going up in flames and then tripping the entire grid, and then the Brinning Kebbi station as well, going up in everything completely burnt. And people are saying, sorry, hold on a minute, can there be sabotage? Could this be as a result of sabotage? Because it's suspicious. And to now know that that line is even feeding Niger Republic, we are beginning to ask questions. Is there more to it than we are seeing currently?
All right. Okay, we'll take a pause here and take a break, and then we'll not release you just yet because we have a lot really to chew on this subject. So we'll take a short breather. When we return, we'll continue our conversation. Please join us again.
Welcome back to Daybreak on Trust TV, coming to you live, of course, from our studio in the nation's capital, Abuja. And right now, we'll take a look at the headlines as usual, But we'll start with this one quickly. It says, I have met one of your demands. Lalong asks NLC not to cripple the economy.
All right. Second headline, FG to harmonize country data, curb multiple ID registration, says Minister.
The IMF, climate change poses risks to financial price stability.
All right. Now, continuing our conversation on the power sector, we still have Oyebode, Fadipe, CEO, Sage Consulting and Communications, and also Dr. Abubakar Atiku. He is a former managing director, transmission company of Nigeria, talking to us about the power sector and how best to manage that sector in the interest of Nigerians. Well, picking up from where we stopped, Dr. Abubakar, let me go to you on this one. From the discussions that we've had so far, it appears that there are different layers of challenges in the power sector. And, how do you think the new administration's approach should be in tackling these challenges that we have touched on?
Well, I'll first of all say that it started on the right footing by having the new Electricity Act in place. I think this will go a long way in making sure that first we have enough generation through states before they are not allowed to generate. When REBs were in place that time, we were doing decentralized generation, but with coming of NEPA, it was stopped. And now it has given the states the opportunity to set off small or medium generating companies, mini hydros, solar, PV systems, mini grids. They are all options for the state, which are not as capital intensive as the conventional thermal systems which we are operating now under the grid. So I think that will open up the generation sector. Likewise, transmission in their own areas of operation. They don't have to go to a higher voltage like transmission does in 330 and 132, but they can operate within 33 kV network, 11 kV networks from their mini grids. So they can expand the transmission to intercities and their communities. Then the distribution aspect too, which after they have set off their own regulatory agencies, similar to what we have in the center, the NEC, they can be able to regulate and issue licenses to all these sectors in their state. So the distribution there can be handled in such a way that most of the issues we are encountering now with the larger distribution companies can be solved at that level, and it is better managed. Right now, of course, as a lot of people know, most of the franchise areas of the distribution companies are so huge for them to manage. But with this, it is decentralized, which means you can be able to focus a particular area with a better customer orientation, meter them, and be able to collect the revenue from them. So once this is done, the liquidity will improve. Of course, coming also to the larger perspective as we are now. So there is a lot need to be done on the distribution companies. They should be encouraged to be able to drive the liquidity by, for example, MDS, as we said. Let them try to settle all the outstanding. Once it is done, it will give the distribution companies a lot of funds to invest and improve.
Doctor, okay, so you know, the best thing in life is, you know, finding a problem and solution. So right now what you're saying is that the federal government, you know, what the decision they've made, it's already looking like a solution. But we need to go back in order to avoid making the same mistakes that we have been making for the longest time. So initially, you know, before approaching the privatization process, there was a roadmap saying that by 2020 we'll get to 20,000 megawatts. But then we are still about 3,000, and you're saying, okay, we can generate about 8,000, but then the distribution is not, okay, we can generate 13,000, but the distribution is not even 8,000. So at what point was there a full stop to that particular dream, that roadmap?
Well, I don't think there's a full stop. It is a continuous thing, only that the dream hardly comes true. But there's still hope, because all the stakeholders are really doing what they should to be able to improve. Like I said in my opening remarks, that most of these generation companies, they have really improved and they have added capacity. Transmission, as Oladipo said, they have done quite a lot to expand the grid. But coming to distribution, that's where my problem lies. A lot of them have not added a single injection substation. Distribution substation keep on failing. That's the local transformer that supplies you and me. They are not being replaced, even repaired. So you find the communities...
But who is to blame for the transformer not being replaced? Or
it is the distribution company, because they have to drive their business. They have to...
How come if a transformer in an area explodes, is the consumers that have to gather
it is very wrong. It is,
and pay?
It is very wrong.
And buy, and meanwhile, if they should pay, they get charged for a new one, but then they bring them like an old, you know, repaired, a refurbished one. And the moment it's been camped, then it belongs to the power sector.
Yeah. So let me come in here. I think the regulator is supposed to be on top of this. There should be an order to enforce the distribution companies, to give them time limit within which to fix a transformer that is burnt, failure of which they should be charged, just like he said. There should be ramifications for not doing the right thing. And when it comes to capital contribution, people buy transformers on their own, maybe for their houses as dedicated. They draw the line, and distribution companies get the benefit of this, yet they are not being compensated. So NEC should come up with a clear way of compensating customers who are able to invest to assist the distribution company. They should be paid back either monetarily or in terms of energy, just like the metering it has imposed.
Okay. Let me throw this to Oyebode. Really quite a lot to talk about. Indeed. But how optimistic are you about this Electricity Act that we have now signed? Yes, good enough that states can now generate power and so on, and then the other layers, you know, of power generation and distribution and so on. But is there a likelihood here that this whole new idea also will be hijacked by the same things that have frustrated the power sector, the privatization process itself, talking about, you know, the politics side of power and then the business side of it conflicting and so on?
Now you have put me in a very tight corner, but I'm sure I'll be able to wriggle out. Now, laws are not an end on their own. They are only a vehicle of conveyance from where we are to where we want to be. Now, if you look at the power sector, let's not even go too far. Let's just start from 2005 when we had the Electricity Sector, Reform Act 2005. That one lasted up to 2023 when we had a new one, obviously because of inadequacies. But how far did that 2003 law take us? To the best of our knowledge, given the fact that given the time a new one was brought in, it means that the old one brought us to the point where we are. And yet we are not satisfied with where we are. True or false? We are not satisfied with where we are. So where will this new one take us to? And why are we where we are? It is the laws do not operate themselves. Human beings operate the law. So it means that to a very large extent, it is not the law that is so faulty. It is the operators of the law that we need to look at very closely. A lot of optimism have been expressed in terms of the 2023 Act, but those who are supposed to operate it, will they allow it to work that way? The first thing you will see, which answers your question technically, because I'm sure at the end of the day, we might be pessimistic about what the law is likely to do, given our 10 years history. Where would the states get the fund to drive the opportunity that they have? And I'm happy that Dr. Abubakar has professionally and with a lot of wisdom counseled that you don't need to go to the 330, 132 voltage level. You can start with 11 kV distribution network, partnering with transmission that is within your environment. I mean, FCT operating as a state can work with TCN through Katampe or any of the transmission stations. Nasarawa State has I think the newest in the country, the newest 330 substation in the country. Benin is there. Ikeja West is there. Several other transmission locations are in the country. So you may not need to reinvent the wheel from that perspective. But with 11 kV and 33 kV network, distribution network, which is the voltage operational level, you can work with the local disco or set up your own. And good enough, quite a number of states, with Lagos leading the pack, Osun is showing traction. As of 2 weeks ago, I was in Oyo State to interface with the state government, and I know that they are doing a lot. Edo has passed their own law. Once they are able to pass their law, they will work within their own state. Otherwise, NEC is still expected to regulate. But at the end of the day, will they be able to bring us the power sector that law dreams of? So it depends on the political will, number one, to say, look, I have an opportunity, there is an opportunity for me to turn my state around. Where a chief executive says, I want to leave a legacy, I want to be remembered for something. If it is only power problem alone I can solve, let it be that generations to come, they will remember that here was a man who removed us from darkness and put us in light. And then you are able to do that. Others can build on it, but is the political will there? Will it not become political megawatts that we are seeing on paper every day?
Exactly.
Do you get what I'm saying? Are they going to give us real megawatts or political megawatts? Is it going to be campaign projects? We will do. And
again, how can we guarantee that the licensing of the distribution companies at the subnational levels also is not taken over by political consequences?
That's exactly where I'm going to, because for you to have political megawatts, it must mean that you gave license to politicians. I mean, so it's, and you know, power is an emotive thing. I don't know whether you have felt it. You are driving to the house and you see lights in front. Oh, maybe while you are coming from the office, you were not really very happy. But the moment you become a little bit more excited, dancing to the music in your car. But maybe before you get to the house, oh my God, oh my. The whole frustration of the office comes back fully again. And if your child is not careful at that material time,
the annoyance will be transferred.
Dr. Fadipe, let's talk about, there is this thing happening, you know, the doctor mentioned earlier that it's not up to the consumers, you know, to get transformers for themselves. But there is this situation that happens perhaps when a house is vacated for about 3 months to say 1 year, and then someone, you know, just moves in, the person is charged to pay for that particular period of time. Is that supposed to be so?
See, let me tell you something. Let's be honest with ourselves. Everybody is guilty about whatever whatever the power sector is today. All of us, government, consumer, Everybody, and if we have the time, I will just bring out each person's position. Now, a customer moves into a house. Let's even start from our town planning. We have a very bad town planning system. That's number one. Two, our identification system is also contributing to it. If you live in the US, if you like, run from Maryland to Texas. Whatever you have done in Maryland will haunt you in Texas because it is the same social security number. If you leave your bills in Maryland and you run to Texas or you run to any other state, they will catch you. But here, I can leave day and come to Mitama. I am a big man already. You dare not come to my person. I am a brand new. All my sins are forgiven. That is to the extent. Meanwhile, he consumed the electricity in day legitimately, but he left the bill there and walked away. Maybe he had a meter or he didn't have a meter. When he got now, the discos are supposed to put meter there because it's one of the most important components of their operations. But maybe the customer even met a meter there. He bypassed the meter. Can you see everybody at the same time? And he left the bill there. The disco did not put meter there. The one that has meter, he left the bill there or he bypassed it. The regulator that is supposed to punish the disco is not punishing the disco. The disco reports to the police that a customer has done this to my meter. The police collects bribe. Can you see the vicious circle? All of us. In terms of who should put a transformer there, it is the responsibility, quote me, of the disco to provide the transformer. And NEC regulation says that if a customer is going to put a transformer there, he has to discuss with the disco and they agree on the cost and the modality for refund. However, discos hide behind something. They will tell you it's not that we don't want to put a transformer there, but we don't have the fund for it now. And you can wait there for 10 years for all the care. They are not in a hurry to put a transformer there. Some of them will even tell you, look, you are owing so much. If you don't pay, we won't put a transformer. And they walk away arrogantly.
Now, there's also another issue. It appears as if there's a deliberate intent by distribution companies not to provide metering systems for residents, for customers, because perhaps the estimated billing is most preferred and all that.
Yes, I've had that argument a lot of times, and I try to enter this defense in their favor. It doesn't make sense to put a customer on estimated billing, and I'll tell you why. Take, for instance, I know that estimated billing methodology has a capping system, which means that certain areas you cannot bill them beyond a particular amount because there is an aggregate consumption that they assume that customers in this geography will consume. But take somebody, and I always give example of Pape and Asokoro. The line feeding Asokoro is the line feeding Pape. So, and because of the eyebrow nature of Asokoro, Pape enjoys that advantage. Now, and Pape's capping is far lower than even the BQ of the person in Asokoro. So, and here it is, the person in Pape may be living in a duplex with air conditioner, maybe a 5-bedroom duplex with air conditioner filling up every place, but no meter, is on estimated billing, maybe about 300 units per month. Is enjoying that supply compared to the person who is in Asokoro, who, because of the eyebrow nature, his own estimated billing is about 500 to 600 units. So you see that the disco is losing in Pape but gaining in Asokoro, because the person in Asokoro who maybe is in a BQ is not using up to 500 units that is being billed for. So at the end of the day, you want to ask the question, are they really benefiting from estimated billing? But that is not to say that my position is 100% correct, because there are also customers who don't consume that much at all.
So
yet they are forced to pay that amount.
So the benefits here, maybe not to the electricity company directly, but perhaps to the employees of the company.
Now, the only way by which the employees can benefit from it is that they collect bribe. Let's say it as it is. Okay, look, you are owing us this amount of money. If you don't want us to disconnect you, do this for us. Maybe that's the way they benefit. But of course, the discos will bring you the bill and you are expected to pay, and if you don't pay, they disconnect you. So, but this is the real reason why I say that it may not be profitable for them. With meter, they should be able to collect more. Because that is what we saw during COVID, when power was moved to the residential areas. You know, during COVID, there was a period we were asked not to go out, we were restrained. And if you remember very well, electricity was constant during that period. At least you could boast, even in far-flung areas, you could boast of 18 hours, because again, that helped people to remain at home, no boredom and stuff like that. And from records, and I stand to be corrected, though, I mean, fund from prepayment was record breaking during that period. At least with no sense of humility, I was in a position to know, as GM communications, I was in a position to, in fact, anybody can see collection figures, it's not a hidden thing. So, but doing the analysis, we saw clearly that those who were on prepaid meter, money that came from there was very high. It was a record amount, because people were at home and they had meters. Okay.
All right, Dr. Abubakar. Now, the government came up with a policy, a program. They call it the mass metering program, which I believe is still in place.
Sure.
But it's something that some are of the view that it's been taken over by racketeering. It's not playing out as envisaged by the government. Talk to us about the mass metering program.
Yeah, that is a very good initiative that is meant to really bridge the gap of metering. Presently, we have almost 7 million customers unmetered. And the investment to meter is quite huge for the distribution companies to handle. So government, in its wisdom, came up with this program, and that fund was provided through the CBN as a loan to distribution companies to use it to procure the meters. So when the first zero, as they call it, started, they invited bids for manufacturers and even those who have the vendors that have the meters available. They were targeting 1 million meters, but on the aggregate, they were only able to get close to 800,000 meters procured at that time. So, as you rightly said, these meters were apportioned to the 11 distribution companies, and they were asked to deploy. So a lot of issues are out there, which has even paused at the tail end of the program, CBN, to freeze the account of those involved, that is the meter providers, because of the fraud that was involved. A lot of distribution companies, some of them, collide with the meter providers to just provide invoice of meter deployment while the meters were not deployed, and they use the money to satisfy themselves. So this was discovered, and I think EFCC were invited. We are yet to see the result of that. But then, that does not mean that the program should be stopped. So government has embarked on the second phase, which is about to commence. It should have commenced by now, but due to certain technicalities too, it is still not yet. So they are targeting almost 4 million meters in this space. And they are now concentrating on only accredited local manufacturers of this meter, or those doing the assembly, not importation. So that has given them the opportunity also to develop the meter industry. So we are waiting for that. When that happens, these meters will be deployed and given to the distribution companies. And of course, we know where the issues are. So that should be taken care of so that we don't repeat the mistake of the first phase.
Doctor, from what you said, we've realized that corruption has eaten deep into the system, that at every level, you know. So these particular meters that perhaps when made available, should the consumers be buying them? And if they are buying them, at what price? Because we've seen some purchasing them for 30 and some purchasing them for almost 70,000.
Yeah.
Which consumers are saying it's not fair.
Yeah, yes, very low. Correct. Anyway, what is happening?
It's 88,100 and something thousand.
Exactly, it has been reviewed offward now. Anyway, what is happening is that when there's an NMPP, mass metering program, customers are not supposed to pay. They are supposed to be given these meters free. Just get your address, the distribution company will identify you, go and fix it. And then it becomes customers' property. But whereby you need to pay, because even with this pre-metering, it's not adequate to bridge the gap of that 7 million. So we need to have a means of also getting more meters. If a customer, for example, cannot wait for the pre-meter and he needs this meter desperately, he is free to approach the distribution company through meter asset providers, like private entities who are willing to procure the meters and deploy. So we have them. So that's whereby you are required to pay. So when you pay, the map provider will go and install the meter for you on the provision that it will be refunded to you, just as being imposed by NEC of recent. It has to be repaid to you over a period of 36 months, I think, in terms of energy. So that means it has now...
But people are not getting that, Doctor.
Well, it's just starting, like I said, but I know under the MAF, people are getting metered by paying, but they have not started getting the repayment. But I'm optimistic that with the new order enforced by NEC, you will start to see refund of this meter charges in energy.
Okay, so are there conditions or requirements that qualifies one to benefit from the mass metering program, or it's just for anybody?
There's no condition. It depends on the distribution company. They prioritize the areas where they want to deploy. Of course, like he said, we have high-brow areas. We don't allow them to be on estimate. And even the low-brow areas, whereby you put them on cap billing. So it means they are terribly underpaying. So it's better for distribution company to meter them. So distribution company will now prioritize those areas because we all know where we are losing. So that's where the areas you will now prioritize in metering, but not because we want this person or that person to have meters. Okay,
perhaps Oyebode could touch on that as well. What are the considerations for you coming from the distribution company?
Now, the most important qualification for any customer to get a meter is that you are an end user of electricity. But let's even say this about, if there is one area where particularly the discos need to get a whip on the back, and possibly the regulator, it is about metering. That's one area where I've seen very disturbing inconsistencies. Let's look at the history. We started with, shortly before privatization, we had CAPME, Credited Advance Payment for Metering Implementation. And the modality for that CAPME is not completely different from the modality for MAP. The fundamental difference between the two of them is that for CAPME, the refund came with an interest of about 12% because it was interpreted to be a loan. That's where the advancement came in from. It was supposed to be a loan from the customer. And when you get a loan from the bank, that's the philosophy behind it. You pay some interest. So the discos were expected to pay some interest. But no sooner we went into privatization than that policy was stopped. And then we went into another metering policy. That one was stopped. We went into another one. The fourth one, I think, was MAP. As far as I'm concerned, with my knowledge of the power sector, the most successful metering policy is MAP. I saw it clearly in AEDC. I hope they pay me for this I saw it clearly because you could get a meter in a day. They will go to a particular location with all the facilities, their IT facility, everything. Customers will come. Once you can wait, they register you that day, do all that you need to do, and somebody will go to your house, do the technical inspection to make sure that your wiring is okay, and then they will install your meter for you, maximum 48 hours. And AEDC was ahead of all the discos in the country at that material time. Suddenly, there was a policy somersault. No, we don't want map again. You can do it. And then we came into what Oga called NMP. Yeah. And then that one, ground zero, stage 1, stage 2, whether it's cancer, only God knows that we are not. I mean, and here we are today. Records showed, when I was in AEDC, that low meter penetration areas returned the lowest in revenue or the highest in loss. They were the high loss making areas. So again, that's why I said it doesn't align with wisdom to say that discos benefit from estimated billing. It doesn't align. Because when you look at high loss making areas, a fundamental reason is because of the low metering penetration. So for me, one area where the market needs to concentrate on, because revenue from the disco is what services the entire value chain. TCN is there, Embed is there, the NEC is there, generation is there. They need to pay the gas supplier, they need to do everything, even the ancillary services. NEMSA is there, NAPTIM is there, all of them. It is the money they get from the customers. So if anything goes wrong with that pipe, that line, that supply line, then there's problem in the entire market. And that's why we have liquidity challenges in the market today. Because of the extremely low meter penetration. Metering penetration is less than 50% all over the country. And that's sad.
All right. Well, I think it's a good place for us to end the conversation. It's quite an interesting one. At the end of this conversation, we have seen that everybody's hands is in it as well. We are all complicit in one way or the other in terms of...
Except the journalists.
Well, journalists are Nigerians as well. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Oyebode, Fadipe, CEO, Sage Consulting and Communications, and also Dr. Abubakar Atiku, former Managing Director, Transmission Company of Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on Daybreak and giving insights to this subject.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Well, you've heard it all. I hope that we all be more deliberate with our power supply. Just know when you default in payment of your bills for power, you know that you are in one way or the other causing damage to the whole system. Well, we'll take a short break now, and then when we return, Daybreak will continue. Join us again.